I don't get that one. Oh, look what my daughter made. Doesn't that look good? My goodness, that was so tasty yesterday.
Like a flourless type thing?
Yeah, it was. No, it was brownies with, God, it was super chocolatey with blueberries, and she's a good little cook.
Wow.
We went out on the Vaucluse and
Gotta bring some in next time.
we were in her class. They have a program where you stay on the Vaucluse and the kids get to be like sailors, and they have to learn all these things like tying knots and making food and pulling up and then you have to wake up in the middle of the night and do your little night watch on the boat.
Cool, very nice.
So the little boys really enjoyed it. The little girls not so much. My daughter liked it; she enjoyed it, but it was cute. And they had actors playing the role of the crew, and they and four adults or four of us parents. And we were supposed to kind of be the tall sailors who were real quiet, just sort of watch everything.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, it was. And we got to know at breakfast, we got to sit down with, while the kids were eating in their little area, we got to sit down with the actors and find out all about them and their background and how they got into this.
So you want it sailing on the bay?
No, it's just, the Vaucluse is like a floating museum. It's been sitting down there pier, on the High Street Pier for like 50 years. And it used to be a cargo vessel. It's about 160 feet. It was built in Scotland. It operated out of San Francisco, and it basically went up and down the coast, up to Alaska, down, all the way down to South America, over to the Far East, all around Cape Horn, up over to Africa and Europe. It was active for 50 years, until the 1930s. And then some people got a hold of it, and they were just going to use it for scrap, and some enterprising guy thought, this is a classic old ship, I want to buy it and restore it. So he brought it up to the Bay Area and restored it. And he got tired of it because it was too expensive, and so
I can imagine.
he donated it. And the Park Service was looking for vintage ships because they have this display. I don't know if you've ever been to the High Street Pier. There's like 6 different ships. There's a ferry there. There's a sloop. They're all these old ships, and you can go on all of them. It's like a little walking museum. It's really interesting.
That's neat. Where is that?
At High Street Pier, which is right next to Aquatic Park. You know where the polar bear near Ghirardelli Square. Yeah. So here's the Aquatic Park. Where the people go swimming.
Yeah.
And then on that pier over to the right, it's halfway down the pier. It's a beautiful old ship. So I took a picture. I'll show you real quickly. When I was on my night, I got the great assignment, 1:30 to 5:30 in the morning. So that's the Vaucluse at 1:30 or 5:30 in the morning or whatever it was, 2:30, 3:30.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, the kids were they really enjoyed it. They'll
remember that for us.
Oh, they will. Yeah, it's a big deal to them. So. There was one mom. She's really cool, but she's like, I'm never going to do this again. She's got another kid because the accommodations were extremely uncomfortable, cramped, small. There was no place to. Basically, it's like a little box you climb into, and you put your sleeping bag on it, and it's like hard wood. There's not enough room to stretch, and she did not like that. Then she had to get up at 5:30 in the morning. Wasn't happy about that either. So, kind of a. My wife was saying, she's kind of high maintenance, that one. I said, well, not so much that. She just likes the creature comforts. Women are that way. My wife would be the same way.
Yeah, my Eva would not put up with that.
I don't know too many women that would.
No.
That's why I said the little boys loved it, but the girls, we had 18 boys and 6 girls, so.
Well, especially if they're little.
Yeah, 10-year-old, 11-year-old kids. They're great kids. And the teacher who was also along, but she said, she's a little younger than me, she said, this is the best class I've ever had. Your daughter is one of my favorites of all time. So,
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, you ready?
Yes, we are ready.
Okay. Here we go.
Yes, indeed.
Well, welcome. You're listening to Sports Econ 101, the show where we discuss sports topics from a business perspective. I'm your host, Edward Brown, along with my co-host, Bruce McGowan, longtime sports radio personality. And today's show is going to be really fun. Why, Bruce?
Well, we got one of my old friends and a basketball pioneer from the 1960s, played with the Warriors in the 60s, coached them in the 70s, worked in the front office in the 80s, still involved with the team. Edward, 56 years later, Attles. And he's going to talk about this current Warrior team and compare it to some of the great teams of yesteryear and some of the great teams, more recent vintage, like the Bulls of the 90s with Michael Jordan. So it'll be fun to talk to Alan. He's got some great stories about the likes of Wilt Chamberlain and Oscar Robertson and Jerry West, too.
Yeah, he's been on our show before, but last time he was on, the Warriors were not quite as good as they are now.
Boy, they
were doing well, but not. I mean, nobody's not as well as us.
No, cover of Sports Illustrated, they won 2 games recently in overtime in the final seconds. I mean, they're just having an amazing season, and it's a lot of fun to watch. I think even people who are not from the West Coast are paying attention to what Steph Curry and this team is doing. It's fun.
Well, it's amazing when you go to other cities and see how many people are wearing Warrior gears and rooting for them.
It reminds me a lot of the Michael Jordan phenomenon of the 1990s when everybody became a big Chicago Bull fan because they wanted to be like Mike, because, the guy was special. So when you have that special athlete, he kind of transcends, fan loyalties, and you don't worry so much about the color he's wearing. You worry about just watching him and seeing him play, and then you root for him.
Poetry in motion.
There you go.
Especially that game in overtime. Fortunately, I DVR'd it, and I was smart enough to add an extra hour.
Good idea.
Because I missed that before.
Good idea.
In fact, I missed the sixth game of the World Series with the Philly. I'm trying to remember. It was Texas Rangers and
the Cardinals.
And the Cardinals.
That was a great game.
Yeah, and of course it went so long that my DVR stopped.
I think the Cardinals were down to their last strike twice or three times, something like that.
And then had to watch it on the highlights. Okay.
Yeah.
At each commercial break, we're going to ask a sports trivia question, give away some vacations, and the theme is going to just be miscellaneous sports trivia. All right, this segment of Sports Econ 101 sponsored by Pacific Private Money, providing mortgage investments currently yielding over 8%. Check them out, pacificprivatemoney.com. Don't touch that dial. Sports Econ 101. I'll be right back.
I was thinking with Al, maybe to start with, we could talk a little bit about the past and then kind of move forward.
Okay.
But if you want to, one good thing you might want to throw out there is he was on the floor and was playing with the Warriors the night that Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points back in 1962.
Yeah, that's what he said. They both scored 117.
Yeah, he's told that story before.
That's funny.
But that is a fun story.
In fact, Jim Barnett and Bob Fitzgerald mentioned that a couple nights ago. I like Bob Fitzgerald.
He's gotten better. He's had a rough time. His wife is dying of cancer. It's really rough. Yeah. She's got cancer of the pancreas, which is the worst.
That's the worst one.
Yeah, it's bad.
I had a friend die of that.
She's been sick for about 2 years. Yeah, it's tough. Very tough.
Well, she must be young too, isn't she?
Yeah, he's in his early 50s. So he was born in 64. Wow. 60, was it 64? 66. He'll be 50 coming up here. Yeah. So she's only, she's not quite 50. Well, that's like my wife. My wife could be falling in the same boat here pretty soon. Although right now, she's doing really well. So knock on wood.
Yeah, just enjoy every day.
Why
think about, because then 5 years could go by and you go, instead of having all this worry all this time.
Yeah, let's enjoy life. That's her attitude. It's great. It's infectious, and I think it's helping to kind of stave things off too. All right. Hi there.
It's being recorded.
It's being recorded as we speak. So good language.
Try not to swear.
Yes, no swearing.
You're very good at that.
I'm very good at that. I try to do that.
Hello?
Hi, is Al there?
Yes, he is.
Thank you. She didn't screen call. It's good that he's got a landline. It helps.
Yeah. Hal doesn't believe in cell phones.
No, I can't. A lot of those guys don't.
No. That's okay.
Yeah.
If you don't need it, he doesn't.
How many years have we go along without it? Oh. Al, it's Edward Brown and Bruce McGowan, your old friends.
Hey, Al.
Never heard of.
Sing us there. What do you guys want?
Yeah,
what are you doing? Bother me.
Doing?
Get out of here.
Hey, we want to sell you a timeshare. Are you interested?
I can't afford it.
It's in the swamps in Florida somewhere.
That's what comes with a few alligators.
Yeah, a few alligators.
Right.
Well, if you're ready, we're ready. How's that?
Okay, whatever you want.
Okay, all right. We're going to start this right now. Here we go. Well, welcome back to Sports Econ 101. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. I'm sorry for laughing, but who's on the phone?
We got Al Attles on the phone, the former Warrior coach, former player, former front office guy, and of course now the longtime ambassador for the team, has been involved with this team. I don't think there's anybody who's been involved with a pro sports franchise in any sport for over 50 some odd years. And Al, your association goes back to an earlier time when the team wasn't even in the Bay Area, and you got to play along your good buddy Wilt Chamberlain. We've talked to you about your association with Wilt and his kind of larger-than-life caricature that a lot of those of us in the media have kind of painted him as a certain type of person. But he really was a fascinating guy. Can you talk a little bit about Wilt and what he meant to the game at that time?
Never heard of.
That's why I was laughing.
Never heard of him.
He said the same thing about us.
He was the absolute best. But I tell you what was great about him. For as great as he was as a player, he was a much better cared about the game. He really, really cared about it. And it's unfortunate that the only thing that surprised me about Will, the only thing that surprised me about Will, is that he died at such an early age.
Mm. Well, maybe that was because he lived such a large life, though, literally and figuratively. I mean,
It wasn't as large as people thought.
Mm.
He was a caring person who really, really cared about the game. He cared about his teammates. And he would say things that people never thought he would say. For instance, the year he averaged, 50 points a game. And his teammates, all we wanted to do was score. And he would say to you, look, don't worry about me scoring. Don't worry about me scoring. He said, let's do everything we can to win the game. And don't worry about what I get or what I don't get. I only want to be concerned about winning. Now, obviously, we want to be more concerned about him scoring because the more he scored, the more the game.
Sure.
But he was just such a great person. And like I said, and I say it, in all honesty, that the only thing that surprised me was when I got the call that he had passed, because a teammate of mine in college was his high school teammate, so we were very, very close. And like I said, the only thing that surprised me because he had a sickness that anybody knows that he had, and it was just a surprise to all of us.
Wow. Well, you go back, as we mentioned, to the 60s, and that was a different time when the game on the pro level, there were only about 12 teams. And the way the Warriors are currently playing, in some respects, reminds me of the kind of basketball that you guys played, where there was a lot of sharing of the ball, a lot more of an emphasis on defense, spacing the floor, finding the open man, a lot of passing. I remember it kind of reminds me of that movie Hoosiers, where Gene Hackman's playing the coach, and he goes, you guys will pass it 6 times before you take a shot. It almost is gone back to that, hasn't it, Al, with this current Warrior team? They've almost revolutionized the game and turned it back into what we used to see.
Well, I don't like to make comparisons, but I do compare that team. The fact that there was only one thing that we cared about, and that was trying to win the game. And I can remember, I grew up in New Jersey, which wasn't too far, north wasn't too far from Philadelphia. And I would go home during the summers, and my friends and classmates all would say, you need to shoot more, you need to do this more. And I would say things to them in a nice way. When I see your name on my paycheck, I won't pass the ball to Will. And until I see your name on my paycheck, I'm going to keep passing the ball to Will.
Well, here's an interesting thing. Is the game seems to have changed from the standpoint of player salaries and all that. And,
Exactly.
yeah, I think it seems to me that kind of stands out. Back in your day, it really was more of a team thing. I don't think guys were thinking as much as, gee, how many endorsements can I get if I score the money points?
Well, I think you have so many outsiders now that you didn't have back then. And it's not to say that it's wrong now, because I think both teams did the exact same thing. You want to try to win, but you have so many extenuating circumstances back now that you didn't have back then. And I think that, for instance, you didn't have the coverage like we had. For instance, we had maybe 8 or 9 games on TV back then. Now every game's on TV. So it's a lot different now. Now what's better or worse is not important. What's important is you do whatever's necessary to keep your team on the right track. And the Warriors do a terrific job. And the one thing I don't like to do, I don't like to make comparisons. What we did back then was one thing. What they're doing now is great, and let's keep doing it, because I think it's great for the players, it's great for the fans. So let's keep it going.
Well, it's kind of hard to compare, the greatness of Wilt to the greatness of Curry. There's about almost a 1.5 foot difference between them too.
Well, you played with and against. You played with Wilt and with Rick Barry, later coached Rick, and then of course had to guard people like Oscar Robertson and Jerry West, and of course at that time you had Bill Russell was in his heyday. Bob Cousy was still around. I mean, so many great.
Just fair play.
Just fair play.
Yeah.
But it seems like every team had. Yeah.
No. And like I said, I don't like to make comparisons.
Yeah.
What was good was what happened back then, and what's great is what's happening now. And I think the players today deserve the credit that they're getting. I just think it's great, and I think if you look at the great players back then, who we still are in contact with some of them, they're still appreciative of what they did, but they also appreciate what's going on now. I think it's great, and I just hope that we can continue.
Well, you got to figure 30, 40 years from now, people are going to talk about LeBron James. That even there was, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And and Jordan, is already, it's only been 20 years, and obviously he's still.
That's the great thing about the sport is that it keeps changing. And I grew up in North New Jersey, and I was a big baseball fan. In fact, I could from my classroom I could see New York and the whole 9 yards. And I remember some of the great players, and I became very very close to Willie Mays when we moved out here. But I was a big baseball fan. So I thought I was going to play baseball. So the curveball got me, and I said maybe I need to go to another sport.
And of course, at that time too, getting into the major league level there were fewer jobs available, and there was still an unspoken quota in the 1960s. I mean, when you joined the Warriors, I think most teams tried to have at least no more than 2 African American players. Wasn't that pretty much the unspoken quota?
Okay, well, yeah, when I got there, it was 3 or 4. And
okay.
But they had Will Chamberlain, obviously, that guy Rogers was my teammate, my class, my roommate, and then my other roommate was Andy Johnson, and it was 4 African Americans. But what happened is it was a different era, and the one that everybody did is you went out and you played as hard as you could play, just so where you ended up. But now it's a different situation. But the most important thing is that everybody's on the same page and you try to do one thing as a team, not trying to win, and that's so important.
I wonder if instead of the reason being the race thing of we want to limit how many people could be in the league, that sort of thing. I think it was they may have looked at it and saw how good you guys were and said, no, they're going to have an advantage if they have too many black people on there, so we're gonna limit them so they don't take advantage of us.
Well, I don't think the managers cared about that. All they wanted to care about was winning. And I remember talking to a good friend of mine, Willie, and we talk about it often. I remember talking to Willie because, like I said, I thought I was going to be a baseball player, so the curveball got me. And I remember talking to Willie about it. I said, Willie, don't you ever get concerned about them throwing curveballs at you? And he said, no. He said, what happened is they dust me off. He said, but I'd get up and then hit one out of the ballpark, and they said they stopped throwing at me.
Yeah, it's more the fastballs that are more scary, but the curveballs will get you every time. Okay, we're gonna cut to our first commercial break here. Miscellaneous trivia is our theme. Okay, which teams lost the most Super Bowls in the 1980s? Okay, we're looking for 3 teams. The first email with the correct answer is going to win a free 3-day, 2-night stay at the Lighthouse Resort. Email Edward at sportsecon101.com the answer to this question. Which three teams lost the most Super Bowls in the 1980s? And don't touch that though. And Al, when we come back, we're going to let you answer it. If you know, I know it's not baseball, but that's okay. You can still answer it. All right, stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. Edward Brown here, along with Bruce McGowan and our friend and guest Al Attles from the old San Francisco Warriors.
That's right, and they'll be the San Francisco Warriors in the not too distant future once again.
Exactly. Hey, Al, then you got to put your uniform back on.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll
I can go back to Philadelphia.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. That's true. We'll be right back.
We can be really old.
Yeah, back then the ball was square, wasn't it?
Oh no, I had Will Chamberlain, so it wasn't
Definitely. So I hear that Iguodala may not play tonight because of the hamstring. I guess they want to keep him in. That's something you got to kind of watch because it's a sort of a persistent kind of an injury. Huh?
Is Curry coming back now?
Well, somebody told me a long time ago that's why you have 12 players on the team.
Yeah.
Oh, but I tell you, when I watched that injury, I thought Curry was going to be out for quite a while when I saw that.
I guess he just rolled the ankle slightly. It wasn't too bad.
I hear the same thing that you heard. See, the thing about an injury, you never know because most players aren't going to let you know how serious the injury is.
Watch that one.
Can you play tomorrow? I can play. Well, how bad is the injury? Well, I can't walk today, but I can play tomorrow.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, if you go on the court and you start doing really lousy because of it, not only are you hurting your team, but you're kind of looking kind of foolish too, aren't you?
Well, I think what happens is, in most cases, you say, well, let me see how it feels. Most guys want to play. You go out and you roll a little, you feel once you get it warmed up, you're in pretty good shape, and it doesn't really bother you too much until after the game.
Okay, tell you what, hey Al, let's actually talk about that on the air because I'd like to get
Sure,
your
we can
perspective
get
on
that.
that.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So here, let's
Get on the next
go back.
There we
Here
go.
we go. Well, welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Again, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. When we cut to the first commercial break, we asked this trivia question: which three teams lost the most Super Bowls in the 1980s? Al, do you know the answer to that?
Oh, because anytime team that I'm rooting for lost, I knew they were going to lose again, so I never thought.
Well, I know Denver lost 3 times.
It's skill set
Yeah.
to be done for me later.
That's
Exactly.
right. Okay, Denver.
Yeah, I know Denver lost 3 times. I know Miami and Cincinnati also lost twice.
There you go. That's
Yeah.
that's the answer.
There you go. Well, because I know the 49ers beat Cincinnati twice and they beat
yeah.
Miami once.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And Denver lost 3 times, and that was, yeah, 3 times for John Elway until finally, found the magic in the 90s.
Against Green Bay.
3rd time was the charm, or 4th time actually for him.
But well, growing up in New Jersey, with Madison Square Garden and the Empire State Building right across from my classroom, we didn't think about it very much.
There you go.
So we have on the phone the old Philadelphia Warriors.
That's right. He
That's
was
Al Attles.
drafted by the Philadelphia Warriors. Was it 59 or 60, Al?
1960.
1960. Wow. And
Year
he's
I was born.
been with the organization ever since.
I was born too, but I didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, there you go. Well, and Al, of course, played back in the 60s, coached in the 70s and into the 80s, and then worked in the front office, and now has been an official community ambassador. But Edward, you had a point that you wanted to get.
Yeah, off the air, I was mentioning, we were talking about the Warriors and how Steph Curry had what looked like a pretty severe ankle injury. I know he's kind of young. If it happened to me, I'd be out for about 9 years because of it. But there were 2 questions I was going to ask you. One was specifically, Al, have you ever had a serious injury? Because I'm trying to think. I watched you play because I was even though I was young, I was still watching you play. But I don't remember specifically if you had any like super hard injuries. But then in just looking at what Curry went through, it looked like he could definitely be out for a long time, and potentially he might come back only after missing 1 game. And you were mentioning about players not wanting to talk about how their injuries are, but then I mentioned about how foolish they might look if they're really injured and how bad that's going to be for the team.
Well, unfortunately, back then you were very concerned if you were injured because if you were out for any period of time, you might not ever get a job. Because when I came in, there were only 8 teams in the league, and jobs were at a limit as to how many teams had players. So
and no player unions to protect you.
Oh no, sometimes guys were playing with injuries, and if you go back, you guys are too young to know this. Go back to years, you used to see guys with bandages all over, and now you don't see any NFL because guys were playing injured all the time. But now, one thing you found out is that if you played injured, you hurt your team. But what you want to do is hopefully you get back healthy so you can play. So it's a lot different now than it was back then.
Boy, one guy that always epitomized sort of the Iron Man quality of player back in those days, I remember, was Jerry West. And we didn't know until later that Jerry West had an unusual medical condition, a rapid heartbeat, irregular heartbeat, and it apparently never deterred him. He went out and played, and now it's kind of funny. He was an architect or helped to build, along with not Phil Jackson, but with, I'm trying to think who the coach was, Paul Westhead, and then later, of course, Pat Riley helped to put together some great Laker teams in the 80s.
Right.
And again, now he's been a chief advisor for your club, the Warriors. You have any good stories about Jerry West? Because you must have gone up against him a lot back in the day.
Well, unfortunately, Jerry and I came in the same year, 1960, and I played against him a lot more than I cared to have played against him. We used to have, but there weren't many teams in the league, so we played quite a bit against each other. And, there has to be a guy that you guys never heard of who was a rather decent player. His name has to be Oscar Roberts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oscar may have been even better than Jerry. At least Oscar will tell you that, though. That's one thing I love about Oscar.
Do they call him the little O?
Yeah.
No, it's the big O. Yes.
Got tired of playing against that guy.
Yeah, he'd score, 40 points a night sometimes. Huh?
Well, the thing about him that was so interesting was that, he played all the time, played every minute. So you would think, well, maybe you guys don't get a rest out here. And then the first quarter, he might get 3 or 4 baskets or whatever. But he used to end up averaging maybe 30, so you knew, or if you get 2 or 3 baskets in the first quarter and maybe a basket or 2 in the second quarter. If he had 10 points going into the fourth quarter,
didn't he average a triple double for a season?
Yeah, a lot of them against me.
Yeah.
But you knew how to. The thing about Al, he knew how to defend people. I mean, if.
But see, what you have to understand.
Okay.
Okay, I'm at best 6'6'1", maybe 6'1". I was 6'5" then,
Wow.
and we used to look for a lot of help playing against him. I mean, we used to call guys, "Will, come help me."
Yeah. You want to hear a funny story about Jerry West? Okay. This is I met him for the first time at I guess when Joe Lake had been first taken over, and it turns out, just total coincidence, that a guy who worked for me actually played at a rival high school of Jerry West, and nobody wanted to guard Jerry because of how good he was in high school. And so this guy who worked for me, who was probably only about 5'9" maybe, he goes, "I'll guard him," right? And he goes, "Yeah." And so when he found out I was going to go, meet Jerry, he goes, "Yeah, ask him if he knows Zeke from Cabin Creek," because a lot of people didn't know that was his nickname, right? That's it. And he was telling me a story about how Jerry had just absolutely decimated this guy, right? And so when I meet Jerry, I said, "Hey, Jerry," I go, "Do you know Zeke from Cabin Creek?" And he just kind of gave me one of those smirk smiles, right? And so I said, "Yeah." So my guy who works for me, he went to the rival high school, and he said he guarded you, and he scored 40 points against you. And he just kind of looks at me and he goes, "I don't think so." And I go, "Oh, no, that's right. You scored 40 points against him. Yeah, that's the story."
There you go. There you go.
How's he from Cabin Creek?
Oh my goodness! I imagine that happened to quite a few guys. Well, fast forwarding it out to 1975, you had been the coach of the team for about 4 years. The team had lost some key players. I don't know if some of our longtime fans might remember this, but Nate the Great Thurman.
Let me
Yeah. Go ahead.
We didn't lose Nate.
No, that's right. Nate was traded. That's right.
Contract.
That's right. Contract. He was making.
Unfortunately, Mr. Mueller was the absolute best.
Yeah, the owner of the team.
Called me in,
Mm-hmm.
and he said he was going to have to let Nate go, and
Making too much money.
he and I had got into a discussion about it, and the last thing he said to me, he said, "Alvin, I can't afford it," and all my argument went out the window, because I said, if he tells me that he can't afford something, my argument, I can't argue anymore. But he was really honest with me, and he said he just didn't have the financial wherewithal to do it, and so I went to Nate, and I told Nate, I said, Nate, I don't want to get into any contract, discussions, but your agent is asking more from Franklin than Franklin can afford. And Nate said, "Well, let me talk to him." And that was, but it was a contract dispute, but Mr. Mueller was very honest. I can't afford it, and if somebody tells you they can't afford something, then your argument goes out the door.
Can't really do much about it.
Yeah,
Well,
honest about it.
The thing was, you brought in Clifford Ray, and in some respects, it was actually a good trade in the sense that Clifford was younger. You kind of split the center with George Johnson, and he was more of a kind of he fit into your.
I don't like to make comparisons.
Yeah.
But it was a different situation. Nate was a great scorer and rebounder, and Clifford was not close to the scorer Nate was. But we had a guy by the name of Rick Barry, who you may have heard of.
Yeah. Should have won the MVP that year.
That's true.
Oh, yeah. But it was so political back then and whatever. And I don't like to make comparisons, but we had a terrific team, and I don't like to make that comparison, because it's like people say, well, you won because they left. No, that wasn't true.
No.
Who won the MVP that year?
Bob McAdoo did.
Oh,
yeah, with the Buffalo Braves. Yeah. But you had, a pretty young team. You had Phil Smith and Keith Wilkes, rookies. You had a bunch of unknowns. Guys like, well, Jeff Mullins wasn't unknown, but he was past his prime. Charles Dudley, Derek Dickey.
Well, what it proved that if you get a group of players who are all on the same page, and they're only concerned about one thing, winning, and they're not concerned about who does what, they're only concerned about winning. And Rick was our best player, period, in the report. There was no question about it. And the players were all on the same page. There was no jealousies, and that's why we won. And it's not a knock on other teams or other players, but we were concerned about our team, and
Al, I got to tell you, one of the things I love about guys in your era is this humble spirit. You know, it's just such a different thing. I mean, nowadays you see a lot of these players, and they just don't have.
Well, they're looking for endorsements, and it's the old.
I think
Yeah.
on the outside influence.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember, and I can write a book about this problem because somebody knocked me in the head or something. But I can remember, just growing up in New Jersey, go back home during the off season. I lived in Newark, which wasn't too far from Philadelphia, and I go back home. Then when we played out here, I'd still go back to New Jersey, and all your friends will tell you what you should do.
Oh, yeah.
These coaches, they all are concerned about your bailiwick, and they say, well, but one of my favorite stories was, why do you pass the ball to Will so much? Why do you pass the ball to Will so much? And I relay the story all the time. I said, when I see your name on my paycheck, I'll do exactly what you do.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Hey,
right.
Al, stay with us just for a little bit. We have to get to one more commercial break here.
Okay.
All right. Here's a baseball question for you. All right. What two players share the mark for the most home runs in one season during the 1980s? All right.
Okay.
The first email with the correct answer is going to win that free 3-day, 2-night stay at the Lighthouse Resort. And that's our question. Stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. We'll be right back.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah. So I just had to had to cut you off on that one there. All right.
I'm stumped on that one. Al, you got any guesses on that one?
All I know is I was a Brooklyn Dodger fan.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So was my dad.
So that's as far as I go.
Did you go to games, Al, when you were a kid? Did you have a chance to get over there once in a while? Or?
Well, like I lived in Newark, and I could see the Empire State Building from my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to go over, and because I was a big, and one of my favorite stories was when I met Jackie Robinson, and I was really working for Chocolate.
Oh yeah, the coffee company.
I was supposed to have lunch with him, and we called, and we spoke, and we were supposed to go to lunch, and he called me back, and he said that he had a meeting and couldn't make it. That was the last time I had an opportunity to meet him.
Bummer.
He retired the year that you started, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
1960,
Yeah.
Okay, Al, we're not going to keep you on for too much longer.
No problem.
Anything more specific?
Well, just get into the here and now. Actually, we should talk about the current wars. Yeah.
All right, here we go. Well, welcome back to Sports Econ 101. One more time, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan, my co-host. Here was the second trivia question. What two players share the mark for the most home runs in one season during the 1980s?
I'm going to say one of them might have been Andre Dawson.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other one is the guy from Atlanta.
No.
No.
Who in
Detroit?
Who had a? I remember going to the last game. It was against Kansas City, and they purposely walked him just so that he wouldn't hit number 50.
Jeez, now who would that be?
Mark McGwire.
Mark McGwire.
Ken?
Mark McGwire. That's right. For the that's right. He hit for the A's the last part of the 80s.
1987.
87 or 88. Yeah. Well, Attles is joining us. Al, we haven't talked anything about this current Warrior team other than just to brush briefly on their wonderful accomplishments. But, I mean, you've watched a lot of basketball, and they're being, as you mentioned, you say you hate to compare to other teams. But, I mean, what they're doing right now, is it kind of even stretching the bounds of credulity as far as you're concerned? I mean, are you saying to yourself, wow, I didn't see this coming? Because I don't think too many of us did.
Well, the one thing I pride myself in is I don't like to make comparisons, because if you give me to make comparisons, I start with one guy. His name happens to be Will Chamberlain. So after that, I won't make comparisons. And then there's a guy named Nate Thurman. So I don't like to make comparisons. I got named Rick Barry.
Sure.
I don't like them. But this group, I think you got to give them credit for what they do. They really, really are in a good place there. Curry and just the whole group. So it's just a pleasure to go watch them play. And for, of course, the people who come now, they maybe don't have any recollection of the old days, but, it's like Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth hit the home runs and was out of there. But then Willie came and some other people came, and you just have to enjoy for what it is now. And I really, really, enjoy going and watching them play, because they play the right way in my mind. And I just think it's great.
Yeah, you talk about Steph Curry, that cold-blooded shot he makes from just inside a half court the other night against Oklahoma City. I mean, that was getting to the point of ridiculous. I mean, it's almost like this guy has you sort of expect him to go out. He puts on an exhibition before the game, and then during the game, he even outdoes himself.
Yeah, it's almost like he was trying to make it.
Yeah.
There's one problem I think you have with the fans. They think it's easy.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, he makes it look so easy sometimes, doesn't he? Though?
Maybe because he's being guarded. If nobody's guarding him, maybe it would be harder.
Yeah.
but here's what you do with those people: take them out on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
give them a ball, and say, "Now you try it."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But some of them can't even reach the passer.
Yeah.
So Al, how do the current players, talk to you? Do they ask you advice? Do they revere you because of the
I'm
position?
very, very careful about that because what happens is the one thing you don't want to do, you don't want to ever try to impact what's going on now with what happened years ago. And so you appreciate it and you understand. But the one thing you don't ever want to do is try to get between what's going on now and what went on years ago. But I enjoy going to watch it, and I applaud them, but I have no inkling of trying to impact what they're doing now because the first thing they'll say is, "Well, how good were you guys?"
That's right. That's right.
Well, I mean,
We're close to what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Well, no, but as a coach, though, I mean, you did coach a championship team. I wonder.
Well,
I mean, Kerr is doing a great job, but I wonder, inside, do you ever kind of?
But you have to be very, very careful about that. It's like what you did when you did it was fine, but don't ever try to draw comparisons on what's going on now versus what went on years ago. Just say, it was nice when we did it, but give guys credit. It's like Babe Ruth. I mean, Babe Ruth was a great hitter and all, and now you guys say, well, no, we were better than they were. First of all, it's not important. What's important?
Yeah.
It's the fact that you did what you did when you did it. You just have to let it go.
Well, the game's changed too. I mean, 3-point line and certain
Right on
rules.
the head.
Yeah. And there's so many. The thing about the Warriors is they have such character. I mean, Draymond Green is the emotional leader. You got the Splash Brothers with Curry and Thompson, and the guy that I find really intriguing is Andre Iguodala, who is such a tough defender. I mean, the other night, as we speak, the Warriors are getting ready to play Oklahoma City, and they're going to miss him in all probability because he's got a hamstring problem, and he's the guy that really kind of puts the clamps on Kevin Durant. And he reminds me, Al, in some respects, of some of the old style defensive-oriented type of players. Again, not to make comparisons.
Don't make comparisons, Al. It's not like comparisons.
Yeah, but there is a certain quality of his. Yeah.
What you have to do is when you put a team together, you have to put all the pieces in place. It's like if you have a car. If there's one important piece of that car that doesn't work, the car is not going to work. So what happens is when you put a team together, you have to put all these pieces together, and everybody has to take their position as a very, very important clog of the overall situation. And that's why they're good. I mean, you have, like Draymond Green, like I was reading an article today about where people were saying, well, he gets too emotional. Well, his emotion probably makes him the player that he is.
Sure.
We don't want to step on that emotion.
Yeah.
Don't want to suppress that. That's something
exactly.
that's a valuable asset, isn't it?
What happens is you take all that, and then, if you put a car together and you don't have brakes, you're not going to be able to stop that car. So have brakes. So what happens is the same thing with a team. You're going to have an emotional guy. You're going to have a guy who does this, does that. But when you put it all together, you put all the pieces together. That's the way the team works.
It was interesting. Draymond the other night, I guess, blew up in the locker room and was really.
Something about that.
Yeah, he really, he's ripping his teammates because they were playing poorly against Oklahoma City, and then later, the team comes out and wins the game in overtime, and he apologizes for it. But as you said, Al, I think you can't suppress that kind of emotion because that's who he is.
Well, the most important thing about that, I think, is that the players all understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes those of us who are outside the situation, not only me personally, I'm just talking about people who are outside, they hear something like that and say, well, no, he blew up, he did this. But they don't understand that his teammates understand it. And what happens is they understand that the only reason he's doing that is because he thinks it's necessary to get the team on the right track.
Well, they quote live with him all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Those of us who don't live with him, like you said, all the time, they think, oh boy, he's really blowing up. They don't understand the team
Listen, if they have one more episode like that, his mom's going to come in and talk,
That's right.
and then all hell's going to break loose.
I'll tell you this from personal experience. I grew up in Madison Square Garden, like I said, at Empire State Building. I could see my third grade classroom. And I remember we played in Madison Square Garden. My mother and father came to the game. We got into a little scuffle with somebody. She came down and said, "What was that? Get into a scuffle down there?" And I said, "It was me." She said, "I didn't raise." And what do you think I said to her?
I'm sorry, Mom.
I'll never do it again.
Never do it again. Yeah. Well, you did it a few times though. You were so mild mannered, but when you got on the court, I was gonna say, Al, when you got on court, sometimes it was almost like this different Al kind of. I guess that was like Tom and Sherry was that way too. I understand.
Well, I think what happened with me was listening to Tom. See, guys used to try to take advantage of guys who were smaller than they were, and I see the one thing that they didn't understand. If a guy is 6'8", tries to take advantage of a guy 6 foot or 6'1", and he loses that battle, that's gonna live with him forever. Guy 6'1" does it. Nobody's gonna say much to him if he gets beat by a guy 6 feet. So I wasn't really too concerned. But then I also didn't have too much of a concern because there was a guy who was backing me up. Who was about 7'4" or whatever. They will. So I wasn't really worried. I never ever got into a confrontation that I honestly said I started, but I probably ended a few.
You did. Well, I think Al. I remember Bill King, the late great Warrior announcer, used to call Al the Destroyer. But Al is so mellow now. He sits at midcourt along with the media upstairs and watches the game. And I get the feeling, Al, when you're watching these Warriors play, that you're having as much fun, if not more fun, than anybody sitting in that audience today.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because it's a pleasure to see how the game has changed. I mean, years ago, and I'm going way back now, there was always, some confrontation going on or whatever, and everybody was concerned about their own bailiwick or whatever. And now you see a group of young people playing the game the right way, so to speak. For instance, when I played, and then later on when I coached, we were always concerned about somebody trying to take advantage of our best player, and our best player had to be Rick. And you always on pins and needles. Somebody's gonna try to take advantage of him, get him out of the game. So you always, you don't see that now. You don't see the confrontations that we had back then.
Yeah, but see, back then, in your day that you're talking about, in the 70s, there weren't really any penalties or fines. I mean, unless it was so egregious, right?
Well, I know for a fact, and because after the season, you'll meet with guys, they will tell you what the strategy was, and the strategy was, try to get their other team's best player out of the game by hook or by crook, and they might shake hands, buddies during the off season, but during the season, it was Katie bar the door. So it was like, if Rick Barry's our best player, they're going to try to get Rick out of the game. If Nate Thurman's our best player, they're going to try to get him out of the game. And it's not going to be anything illegal, but it's going to be pretty close to it.
No Marcus of Queensbury rules.
Yes, yeah. That was some fun times. I always remember Bill King had it out for the officials too when he was doing your play-by-play, and he'd be sitting right next to you down there on the bench with his headset on. At one time, I think during a game, he thought his mic had been turned off, and he screamed some choice words at, I think it was Earl Strom or somebody, and the mic picked it up.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. They also, I remember Bill told me the story. He said, I've had people come up and say, who is that guy who's always yelling in the background? That, Attles was on the sideline with that deep, bass voice. Says he sounds like some drunken fool out there. Because you were always screaming and yelling and making noise, and you had that very distinctive voice. Did you get teased about that once in a while?
Yeah, but I remember some situations where, after the season, we have meetings and we laugh about it with the other team. And the guys would say, well, how many fouls do you have? Well, everybody will have 6 fouls. He said, no, you only have 4 fouls. Well, you only have 4 fouls. He said, 2 fouls are going to be taken against Rick Barry.
Yeah.
Extra foul. And so that means if you got me Katie Barton do it before anybody heard Rick get him out of the game. So they're gonna have to go with me first before they get to Rick.
Yeah.
And that was just but it wasn't only the Warriors, it was any team.
Sure.
I mean, so that was just the way the game was played. Now whether it was right or wrong, I don't know, but that was the way it was played. So it was acceptable, and you just dealt with it.
Hey, Al, before we let you go, relating to that, one final thought. Your last game, the game the Warriors won the championship, 1975, you didn't get to watch that because you were kicked out of the game because you had gone in for that very reason to protect Rick Barry. Tell us that story because Mike Reardon went after Rick Barry.
Yeah, you know what? Hey, Al, unfortunately, we have to get to a break. Tell you what, stay with us. We'll come back and you can tell that quick story, okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Quick commercial break here. All right. What player holds the record for most strikeouts? In other words, not a pitcher, but the guy who struck out in a season during the 1980s.
Okay.
All right. So, which player struck out the most, basically, in the 1980s? Stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. We'll be right back with some closing comments, and Al's going to finish off his story. Okay. Sorry about that. This one more quick hard break here.
Yeah. One nice thing about tonight, Al, we get out to the arena kind of early tonight and check out. This is going to be a fun game this evening. This will be a.
Well, when you're winning all games.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess last night, from what I understand, the Thunder blew like a 23-point lead at LA.
Is that right?
Yeah, they were ahead by 23. I think it was in the third quarter, and they lost that game. Now they're having to play second of a back-to-back, so that's not going to be.
They played Clippers.
The only
They
problem
played Lakers, right?
great teams have a way of coming back. So
That's true.
Really have to be.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one we only have like a quick minute.
Okay. Well, I'll get Al to tell that story real quick. Okay.
And then we'll. So Al, Bruce is going to get you to tell that story really quickly, and then we'll say goodbye. Okay?
Okay.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Yeah.
All right, and away we go. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Last time for today, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Bruce McGowan. Here was our trivia question. What player holds the record for most strikeouts in a season during the 1980s?
I'm going to say Bobby Bonds, but that would be more like the 70s. I think
No.
Bobby retired.
Rob Deere.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
186 in 1987 for the Brewers.
Al, tell that story though about how you had to protect Rick in the decisive game of the 75 finals against Washington. Was Mike Reardon going after Rick, and you came onto the floor and
Well, very simple. And
Yeah.
Mike was a hard-nosed player, and back then he just came to play every night. And what happened? The story goes, I heard from some of the guys on the Washington team is that he came into the huddle. He said that he was going to do this. He said, but you have to watch out because you know he's coming. And I wasn't out there to fight anymore. I was only out there to protect our players. And Rick has to be our best player, and I just want to make sure he stayed in the game. And that I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't out there to fight anybody because I wasn't a fighter, per se. But I wasn't going to allow anybody to take advantage of our players. So they told me that it's better if I watched the game in the locker room, but at least kept Rick on the floor and we won the game.
yeah, of course, Reardon went after Barry with the intention of getting him into a fight. And Rick, fortunately backed off, but Al didn't back off. He was intercepted by Wes Unseld. There was a wild slugging match ensued. But Al, that was really that was the high point for you as a coach to be able to, even though you had to watch it on a little TV screen, and to see your team win that thing in 4 games. That was a stunner.
Well, it wasn't as big a stunner for me because I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to have a confrontation with Wes.
That's right. Wes Unseld, 6'8", 250 pounds.
He and I were very, very friendly, but hey, we're both competitors and we wanted to try to win the game. And fortunately, we won the game.
All right, Al Attles, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's nice talking.
Okay.
All right.
All right,
What a
guys.
legendary fellow. Al Attles, good guy, and he'll be watching the game with us tonight out at Elfland.
Excellent. Okay. Thoughts for the day. Earl Weaver said the key to winning baseball games is pitching fundamentals and 3 home runs. Or 3-run homers.
And 3-run homers always help.
That's
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
And Billie Jean King said tennis is a perfect combination of violent action taking place in an atmosphere of total tranquility.
Mm.
Tune in next week to Sports Econ 101. We're going to be discussing sports topics from a business perspective, giving away more free vacations for answering sports trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm Edward Brown, wishing you the best.
Good night, America.
We'll see you next week. So long. Okay,
All right,
just
good
right
shot.
on the money. Yeah, that was good. That's one, I think.
Trying to turn off my phone here so I can save get some little quickie interviews that I can post on the Facebook tonight. That's kind of fun to do. I put the camera up there, ask a